Yeah, thanks for asking.
You've had a wild life, dude. How the fuck does one go from playing in Nirvana and Soundgarden to being a soldier?
It's a longer story.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
I want to hear it.
How long an answer you want?
We got plenty of time.
Okay. So I guess being a professional rock musician was something I kind of fell into. It wasn't something that I had a dream of, It's like, oh, I'm going to be, I love playing in bands. I love playing music, but it was like at this punk rock level where you were never going to make a living at it, It's just something fun to do. And then started playing with Nirvana. And even at that level, still not making money from it, but, touring.
Was it the early days of Nirvana?
Yeah.
So Nirvana wasn't worldwide
at
that point?
No. There were, even on the Seattle level, like one of the smaller bands, Like there was bands like Mudhoney and Soundgarden that were better known than Nirvana was at the time, for sure.
And you played for Soundgarden, too,
yeah.
Which is also hilarious.
Yeah.
And when did you so you're in the beginning, so did you have friction with the band? Like, why did you wind up leaving?
So with Nirvana, it was just, I guess initially, like when I came on board, like Kurt wanted a second guitar player for the live show, basically, like have a heavier sound live, take some of the guitar playing responsibility off him so he could concentrate on vocals, like that kind of thing. And initially, like I thought I was going to be able to contribute to the band creatively, and then it got to the point where I realized that wasn't going to happen. And then the same thing happened with Chad, the drummer, I think. And it was like everyone in the band, including myself, was like very poor communicators, like a lot of passive aggression. And I mean, we were kids, How
old were you at the time?
20, I think. And yeah, I wasn't equipped for it, and it became more and more unhappy with the situation, and then ended up leaving.
So was it that, like, when you would try to put creative input in, it would get shut down, or they weren't interested, or Kurt wasn't interested?
Yeah, so like on the rare time where we actually rehearsed as a band, which was not a lot, Kurt would kind of half-heartedly like, hey, who has ideas? And like I'd throw a couple ideas out, and then Chad, like a very accomplished musician in his own right, would throw some ideas out, and then it'd just kind of be glossed over and like, okay, here's the new song I wrote, and start learning that. So it was very
egocentric,
cursory, It's like he kind of like threw it out there, but then it wasn't going to go anywhere.
And so so you went for Nirvana first and then to Soundgarden?
Yeah, like I left, we did a U.S. tour, like the first full U.S. tour that Nirvana did in 88 or 89. I can't remember what year it was, but I think it was still the 80s. And like I left at the end of that tour, like, okay, I'm done. Like, nice little foray into rock and roll, but I'm gonna do something else. And when I got home, I was planning on going trekking in the Himalayas. Like,
really?
Yeah, that was the next thing. It's like, okay, this was a nice diversion, but I'm gonna kind of fulfill this dream I've had since I was a kid of like trekking in the Himalayas. So I went to Metzger's Maps in Seattle and was buying maps of the Himalaya, of Nepal and Tibet and all this stuff, and like getting gear sorted, and that's what I was gonna do. And then at some point that summer or fall, I can't remember what time of year it was, into summer, Kim from Soundgarden called me and was like, hey, Hero, their bass player then, like, quit. Do you want to audition for the band? I was like, at that point, like, Soundgarden was my favorite Seattle band, like, hands down. And it was like, okay. Fully not believing I'd ever get chosen.
And then you did?
Yeah.
And how did that end?
I got fired.
What happened?
It's complicated. But I think at the end of the day, I wasn't getting along with Chris that well, the singer. And, obviously, who's going to go?
Right.
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah. So how does that translate into becoming a soldier?
I mean, there's more. There's more to the story than that, because there was still, like, I basically, like, getting fired from Soundgarden, like, put me in a pretty bad tailspin. It was a rough patch in my life for sure, and so in order to kind of cut this tailspin off, like I had to do something radical, and what I did was ended up moving to New York. And so, I mean, there's more to the story than that. But moved to New York, like, basically, I grew up in rural Western Washington, like, so it's kind of polar opposite to what my experience was. Like, got a job in a warehouse, got an apartment, and kind of started my New York life, and did that for a couple of years.
What was your plan when you moved to New York? You just wanted to try it, experience life in the city?
I think the main plan was like get out of this funk that I was in, And
How old were you at the time?
21, 22 maybe.
So just young guy trying to figure out life.
Yeah. I mean, like, the Soundgarden thing, I mean, getting fired from Soundgarden, like, it broke my heart. It was a bad spot for me. And, because I love that band, and it wasn't about, I never thought they would get as big as they did. Honestly, it kind of surprised me when they did, because they're a great band, but I always thought they were a little too quirky to be huge, despite the Chris factor, like, this genetically engineered rock star, But I always thought they were a little too weird to have like mainstream success, which was fine with me. I thought they'd be like a big indie band, like Sonic Youth or Butthole Surfers, like that level, And but it was more like I just loved that band, and I loved playing with them, and like having that taken away, it fucked me up for a bit.
So you just went to New York City to try to experience a different life?
Just running for my demons, like that old rubric.
Yeah.
But your demons tend to follow you. So,
always.
Yeah.
What were your demons?
You want to go down that rabbit hole?
Sure.
There's a few. Growing up, and like everyone has a story, right? Like, when my childhood was bad, and my childhood wasn't bad necessarily, but there was a lot of unhappiness for sure, and it stemmed from like my mother and my stepdad not being happy. They're I don't feel bad talking about it now because they're both gone now, but they probably shouldn't have gotten married, and they both, and that's one thing is like an adult, like looking back, you can kind of, you see your parents as human beings and not like these magical creatures that like feed you and take care of you.
Right.
And they got their dreams and their crushed dreams. Like, they're humans. So I have a lot of compassion for them now as an adult. It's like, oh, I get it now. It's like they weren't bad people. They were just people.
And it's just being a child in that environment.
Yeah, because that's, you have nothing to compare it to.
Right.
It's just reality.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I guess this is what being a kid is, Kind of sucks.
Yeah. It can.
Yeah.
But through that suck, a lot of times that's where you sort of get your drive, unfortunately.
Oh, I'm a firm believer that growth is the result of trauma. Like, you need that thesis, antithesis, synthesis, that like Stephen Jay Gould called it, pertaining to evolution, punctuated equilibrium, where like evolution tends to stay stable if there's no pressures, but as soon as there's this introduction of new pressures, usually the result of some cataclysmic event. It's not a gradual thing. It's usually sudden, and extreme, and that's where these new evolutionary pressures are introduced. And it's like, on this level of species, you adapt and survive or you die off. So I kind of like putting that template on the individual. Like, you kind of cruise through life, and then something fucked up happens, and then, hopefully you step up and grow from it, learn from it, all that stuff.
So you go to New York City. You were there for a few years. What were you doing while you were there?
So initially I worked in a warehouse, and it was fine. I was like paying my rent, living in Alphabet City, like having this urban life that I never thought I would have had otherwise.
Did you know anybody there?
Yeah, I had friends there from touring and stuff, and so that was kind of my foothold for moving there. Like, didn't play music. Like, I brought some equipment over. Like, initially I went over with like a backpack, and that was it. And I had a friend of mine's band who were on tour pick me up at JFK and drive me into the city. I still remember this, like the day before, like I was doing different kind of work to save money for the move. So the day before I flew to New York, I was like bucking bales of hay in like a hay field, like farm stuff, right? And my buddy Spike, who I'm still good friends with, played in this band called Mind Over 4. They picked me up at JFK, and I remember sitting in the van and looking at my Converse, and like I still had like straw stuck in the Converse from baling hay the day before. And it was like, okay, here we go.
That's an adventure.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're there for a few years, living that life, and how do you transition out of that?
So I went back to Seattle at some point during the first year in New York to ship more of my personal belongings over. And I went to Sub Pop because they had UPS shipping there. And I'm like boxing up my stuff in the Sub Pop offices and like getting ready to ship it to New York, like including like a Marshall cabinet, like some music gear. But I had this vague notion of, maybe I'll play there. But honestly, I probably didn't touch a bass or a guitar for like the first year after getting fired from Soundgarden. It still kind of had a bad taste in my mouth. But what changed that was summer of 91, maybe. I was friends with this band called Skunk. They're this indie rock band on Twin Tone Records. There are three Matts, Matt Sweeney, Matt Quigley, and Matt Coleman. So Matt Quigley, the bass player, quit right before a European tour that they had booked supporting Babes in Toyland, another amazing band. And so I get a call from Matt Sweeney, and he's like, hey, dude, like, Quigley quit. We got this tour coming up. Do you want to fill in on bass for this tour? So I'm like, I could work in this warehouse in New York, like in the sweltering, New York summer heat, or I could, go to Europe for 8 weeks or whatever and tour. So I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. So learn the songs and did that tour. And to this day, it was the funnest tour I'd ever done. And I think that was because I really had nothing emotionally invested in the band. Like, I like the music, I like the dudes, but it's just, all I had to do was go out and play to the best of my ability, and yeah, it was just fun. There was no burden, no heaviness to it,
Like being a part of Soundgarden.
Yeah.
This immense band that you had a...
Yeah, that I was emotionally invested in.
Yeah. And so how do you go from that to...
There's more to the story.
Keep going.
Okay. So did the European tour with Skunk, and honestly, it was, I think, to this day, the best bass performances I ever did. I got some board recordings from that tour that once in a while I'll listen to it and go, yeah, it's not bad.
Do you think it's because you were free, because you didn't have pressure and burden?
I think that was a component for sure, but also the songs were a bit more complicated, and stylistically, it wasn't necessarily my jam. I was into heavier stuff, and this is kind of more like Soul Asylum, like indie rock, which is great. and the bass parts were really complicated. So I kind of had to push myself to learn them, and again, like, grew from it as a musician. So did the tour, came back. I started playing with this kind of an industrial band on Earache Records called Old Lady Drivers, which is like another kind of interesting foray into a genre that, like, I was a fan of like the grindcore bands for sure, but like even this was like, it's kind of beyond that because it's a lot of synthesizers and drum machines and stuff that I really wasn't exposed to before. But they had a record deal with Earache, and you know who John Zorn is?
No.
So he's an American treasure. He's this avant-garde jazz musician based out of New York. Google him if you get a chance, but like brilliant. Kind of, he does a lot of stuff. He's really prolific. Definitely a genius. But so Zorn was on board. He produced the record, and John actually lived in my neighborhood. So I'd like go to his apartment. He lived like 2 blocks away in Alphabet City, and he had this insane record collection. Like the whole flat was like shelves of vinyl, and it was all organized very meticulously. Plastic sleeves for each jacket. It was, and he was like a student of American music or music in general, and he got his knowledge, and it's just cool. Like, oh, so here's this guy, like very at least on a kind of underground level, like very well known, very well respected, like huge in Japan, of course. And he's just like this nice, kind of normal dude, like giving me a tour of his record collection, and we're both living in this shitty neighborhood in Manhattan. Is this cool? So that was a good experience. Like played shows with them, like played CBs again, CBGBs, which was, the legendary punk club in New York, which even having played there before, but it's just kind of like I would still get excited about it. It's like, dude, I'm playing CBGBs. It's like this mythical place when I was a teenager, and it's like, oh, here I am. So did that, but that was kind of like just a side thing for sure. And then I got contacted. So going back between the Skunk tour and the Old Lady Drivers Experience, I kind of got into playing music again. Like it became fun again, which is why I did it in the first place. Like it brought me joy. But there was a couple times where it got to the point where the joy was like fully extracted from the process, and it wasn't fulfilling anymore. So anyway, I'm back in New York working in the warehouse, doing my thing, and I get contacted by you ever heard of Uniform Choice?
No.
Like a hardcore band from LA from the 80s. I get contacted by Pat Dubar, who was in the 80s the singer for Uniform Choice, and that was a band I was familiar with from the punk days and everything. So he was in this band called Mindfunk, which, first off, like, horrible name. Like, get it? we can go into that later. But Pat contacts me, and he's like, hey, and they were signed to Epic Records, had one record out already. And he's like, hey, we're going to replace one of our guitar players and our drummer. It's like, are you interested in trying out? And honestly, I hadn't heard their record. And I gave the first one a listen and honestly wasn't that excited about it. But it was kind of, like, at this point in my life, it's like I kind of knew, like, if I'm going to give the music thing another go, like, this is going to be it. It's like, do this and it'll either catch fire or it won't. And if it doesn't, I'll go on to the next chapter, whatever that is. And so I don't even think I auditioned for the band. I think they just, okay, you're in. So now we're looking for a drummer. So I went and poached my friend Sean back home in Washington. He played in a band that I was a big fan of, and I was a big fan of Sean, and like convinced him to like come out to New York and like join this band that he'd never heard of, and like it took a lot of convincing to get him to do it, but he did it. And so this kind of Mind Funk 2.0 with Sean and I, one plus side was like, okay, major label, get put on salary, like don't need a day job anymore, right? So once again, I'm a professional rock musician, which not that I care about the title, but it was nice not to have the day job. So we get a house in Monmouth County, New Jersey, in order to write the next record. So band house, 5 of us living in this house. And it was routine. Like we'd get together every day, rehearse, write songs. I was given more or less full creative reign for my ideas and stuff, which was fulfilling on that level. The band was managed by John Zazula. Do you know Johnny Z?
No.
So he was like the dude who discovered Metallica. That's kind of his claim to fame. And he had a label called Megaforce Records, which great 80s movie, by the way, if you've never seen it.
No.
It's so good.
It's about the band?
No. It's this horrible yet brilliant action movie from like 1982, I think. But that's a digression. So John and Marcia had this management company, like Crazed Management. They owned Megaforce Records, and that's the label that put out Kill 'Em All and the first pressing of Ride the Lightning. And they did Merciful Fate, Melissa. They did, some really good records, like the first Anthrax records as well, I think. So John managed some pretty big bands. Like he managed Anthrax, Suicidal Tendencies, Ministry, I think. Like he was this kind of known quantity in the music world, or at least in the heavy metal world, hard rock world, whatever you want to call it. So we had Johnny Z signed to Epic, had the house in Jersey, writing the record. Like with the name Mindfunk, which again is like a dumb name, it kind of turned me off initially. So I suggested like making it one word, like contracting it to make it a little less odious. So I did that, kind of changed the logo. So it's kind of slipping in some aesthetic values that I thought were better, at least, than what was going on at the time.
Why'd you hate Mindfunk so much?
It's just a dumb name, It's like the whole funk thing. It's like, oh,
right.
What, Chili Peppers, like what? No, it wasn't like that at all, But, there's a lot of dumb band names out there. And if the band catches fire, it doesn't matter if it's a dumb name. It just gets accepted. So it's not that big a deal. So recording, blah, blah, blah. Johnny Z. We get to, so we get Terry Date, the producer, on board to produce the second record. And I knew him, he's from Seattle, so I knew him from Soundgarden and from like other local bands that he produced, like a known quantity in that world. We book out Bearsville Studio up in Woodstock, New York. Like the studio's literally like on this old, Dutch farm. It's like idyllic. So we get Bearsville booked out for 3 months, got Terry Date on board. It's like it's September of 90, must be September 92. We pack up the U-Haul, all the gear, drive up to Bearsville to start the next record. So Sean and I are in the barn setting up equipment on this farm to start the pre-production work. Like, I don't know, it's probably a Saturday, or no, it was a Friday. It was definitely a Friday. So we're setting up the equipment to start pre-production work when Terry gets in. And I think Pat came down to the barn as we're setting up, and it's this late September. The heat has kind of left like New York State, so it's pleasant outside. It's beautiful, sunny. Farm, this old barn we're setting up equipment in. And Pat says, hey, we got to get everyone together. We got some bad news. And so Epic, the label, had dropped the band like that day. Like like catastrophic, right? Or could have been catastrophic. And just the fact that it was like a Friday afternoon, I'm sure it was like a post-it note on some dude at Epic's like computer monitor, drop Mindfunk. It's like, oh shit, I got to do that. So it's like, fuck, it's like a $300,000 recording budget. Terry Data's producer. The band's literally homeless. Like, we're gonna live at the studio, but it's like, okay, what now? So the dude who managed Bearsville, and I can't remember his name, he's this British guy, super sweet, and he's like, he saw we were in a tight spot. He's like, and he's out like a huge lump of money, right? Because that studio was booked out for 3 months. That's like a huge, $250,000 probably. He's like, you guys can stay here and sort out what you got to sort out, kind of thing. So I remember Pat and I were living in one of the cottages on the property. It was like this very quaint little farmhouse. And like, we're, at least I won't speak for everyone, but I was in a daze. I was like, fuck, I was like already like lining up, getting my warehouse job back, like all this stuff. And so I remember just like staying in this house, sleeping on this antique leather sofa, and I have my cat with me. So it's me and my cat watching bad daytime TV. I think I lived on like Cheerios and like soda, like just nasty, right? Just because I was too lazy to go to a restaurant or buy food to cook, or it's just like, it's easy, bowl of cereal and some soda. Like, this just sounds so gross now. And that, even then, like, that's not how I normally ate. But during that period, that's what I was eating. So I was watching bad daytime television. And I remember there was this wall hanging in the living room. And it was this macrame, like, koala bear, kind of tacky. And I kind of started obsessing on this macrame koala bear to the point where it's like, if I ever have a daughter, I'm going to name her Koala Macrame. Again, dumb.
Oh, no.
Speaking of dumb names. But luckily that passed, and I came up with a replacement for a daughter's name that was much better. But so during that week, Johnny Z, our manager, who personally I didn't really like him that much, He was kind of, there was something kind of dodgy about him, like in that music business way, that also put a bad taste in my mouth on a lot of levels, just being in that industry. But Johnny, as much as I didn't like him, he came through, and maybe he was motivated by economic reasons rather than, he's being a stand-up guy or whatever. But he signed the band to Megaforce, to his label. Put up the money for the recording to record the record, put us all back on salary, so didn't miss a beat. Like, no one had to get a day job. And then Terry Date, much to his credit, like he had every right to bail, right? It's like, okay, what's the next gig? Okay, I'm there. He got us studio time at Bad Animal Studio in Seattle, which is Hart's old recording studio. It's gone now. Like, all this happened in like a week, 10 days. Like, everything was back on track, just like new label, new studio in Seattle. And so loaded up the gear, flew to Seattle, and like probably 10 days later, we're doing pre-production demos at Bad Animals and recorded the record. And it was done, I think, by December. The mix was done. I actually went back to New York and worked in the warehouse for a month to make some extra money. And then the band, well, not the whole band, but Sean, Pat, and I decided to move to San Francisco just for like a change of venue. So I think New Year's Day or the day after, I loaded up a U-Haul with all our stuff and like drove cross country by myself, which was like a super fun road trip. And then we got an apartment in the Mission District in San Francisco, and that's where like 1993 was a very transitional year, and that's where it kind of things got to the point where it's like, okay, I got to do something different for me personally.
And what happens next?
So we're living in San Francisco, like that, like even while we're living in the house in New Jersey, during the recording process in Seattle and in San Francisco, like taking a lot of drugs, like a lot of hallucinogens mostly, but had my flirtation with heroin, like first started just smoking it, on tinfoil, and then went into IV use. And like I honestly enjoyed it, but it never got its hooks in me. And I got to the point where I was like, yeah, I should probably not continue down this path, and walked away from it.
It's a big step to go to intravenous.
Yeah. Well, like I'm a completist, I guess. It's like I don't want to do it halfway.
See what the fuss is all about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What is the fuss all about?
So the feeling, what's your experience with opiates?
Only like while I've been under like having surgery.
Yeah, so it's the same.
Yeah.
Just that kind of weightless feeling.
It's very nice.
Like it's, I guess the analogy I can make is just that kind of post-orgasmic bliss where you're weightless and everything feels wonderful. It's like that, but induced artificially, I guess. Living in San Francisco, so we toured a lot that year. Probably half the year was touring like Europe and the States. And then when we were back in San Francisco, it was like, still on salary. You didn't have to work. So just hang out and like, drop acid or drink mushroom tea or whatever. And as fun as that is, it was like, like long term, I don't know, if this is going to be right. And it, the record never caught fire. I think it's a solid record. Like when I hear tracks off of it now, I'm kind of like, it's not bad. No, it's okay. There's a couple of the songs on that record were basically nascent Soundgarden songs, There were like riffs or song ideas I had that while playing with Soundgarden, like Chris would hear me playing it, like noodling around, and he'd be like, oh, remember that, And so I had a couple ideas that in a different life would have been on the next Soundgarden record, conceivably. So there's a couple of those songs on there. It's not a bad record. And we did played like a bunch of the big festivals in Europe. Like we did pretty much everything but make a bunch of money, which is, again, most bands. Most bands don't catch fire.
So what happened?
So during this period, 1993, I started, I guess, crafting the next chapter, right, for me. And I'd always been really intrigued by the military. Both my grandfathers were World War II vets. So my maternal grandfather was a tank commander in World War II. And he was kind of my introduction to like military stuff, and I'm a little kid, so I'm intrigued by it. Like, tank commander, that's cool. Like on D-Day, he was an E4 corporal, like gunner on a Sherman tank. On VE Day, his unit had made it all the way to Vienna, and he was a company commander. And it was just survival, like attrition. Like, I'm sure he was a fine soldier, but it was just attrition that he went from corporal to captain in, a year or whatever. My grandmother's second husband was a corpsman in the Navy, so his story is super funny. Like, he grew up in this small town on the Columbia River in Washington State. So I think there was like 20 dudes in his graduating class in high school. And so they graduated June 1942. So right after graduation, like 201, like every male in his class went to the recruiter and enlisted. And so he went in the Navy. His Navy MOS was like a pharmacist mate or something like that. So he's like, oh, I'll be on the ship, like working in the dispensary or whatever. Like, wrong. Like, he graduates, like they give him a helmet and attach him to a Marine platoon, infantry platoon, and like, you're the medic. And so he did like 7 amphibious assaults in the Pacific, like crazy stuff, right?
Wow.
Yeah, like it was super hard, and he had amazing stories, you know. And then my father's father was in the Coast Guard, and he did a lot of coastal patrolling, Oregon coast, Washington coast, Columbia River during the war, just, you know, looking for Japanese subs or whatever.
And so because you had this sort of wanderlust that made you want to go trek in the Himalayas, and you had this family that had this background in the military, you were thinking that this would be something that would be adventurous or intriguing to you?
Yeah, like I've always had a taste for like high adventure, like as a child, like probably even before I was school. So like Saturday morning cartoons. Like, how old are you?
55.
Yeah, we're same age. So I imagine probably grew up with similar cultural influences. So I remember in the like mornings watching TV shows, like cartoons, like Johnny Quest was the big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Speed Racer, Marine Boy, like all this, you know. Speed Racer and Marine Boy were anime, but they were like great, you know. Marine Boy was basically Speed Racer but underwater, you know. It's just super cool, fantastical stuff. Great to feed the imagination. Like the writing for Johnny Quest was so good, you know, and like the show in retrospect was like kind of progressive. It's like Johnny had 2 dads, and like they had this like multiracial like composite family. Like it's like, but the writing was so solid, like super creative. I think it was only 26 episodes, but each episode is distinct and well written and just cool, you know. So I would watch this as a kid and be like, I'm not sure what that is, but I want to do that, you know. So that was kind of the initial impetus for like, and then growing up in the woods in Western Washington, like I was expected, you know, I was kicked outside after breakfast and not expected to be seen again until dinner time. And what I did between then was like on me. And so I'd go out and do stupid stuff like climb high tension power lines, you know, to the top, like 5, 6 years old, like so stupid, right? But it was like, oh, this is cool, you know. Like my mother, she definitely facilitated this stuff, like much to her credit. Like we'd go camping in the Olympic rainforest on the peninsula, and there's like a couple rivers there, but one of the main ones is the Ho River. And I had this, as a child, I had like this $20, you know, Kmart inflatable raft with the oars. And my mom would drive me upriver like 10 miles or 15 miles or whatever in our Volkswagen bus, and like drop me off, me and my $20 Kmart boat and a life vest. And she'd be like, all right, see you at the campground. And so I would be doing this like, you know, whitewater rafting by myself in my cheesy little boat for several miles, and, you know, didn't drown obviously, but it kind of instilled again this, or reinforced this sense of adventure, you know. And I'm sure my mom would go to jail for that today, you know.
Probably not jail, but
yeah,
definitely would be discouraged.
Mm-hmm. So that's background for the high adventure thing, the military thing. So 1993, I'm like, okay, like I need to do something. I need that punctuated equilibrium, right? I need a dramatic event in order to promulgate like the next period of growth or evolution or whatever.
So you really actively thought that way?
Yeah.
That you were trying to achieve growth?
Yeah, I didn't want to stagnate. I didn't want to fall behind, you know. As like I guess as soon as I figured out what life authorship was, or the concept, even though I may have not have known the term, yeah, I kind of endeavored to actively author my own life. You know, pursuing the ends of making a life that kept me engaged, kept me interested, and was meaningful to me, you know. So the military seemed like more and more like a viable option, for that next page, that next step. So I at the time, like 1993, there wasn't a lot of books out about special operations, and pretty much the only ones that were out there were like Vietnam dudes. So I devoured every Vietnam War special operations book, whether it was like LRPs, Rangers, SEALs, SF, whatever.
Had Dick Marchenko written his books yet?
That I don't know. I don't think so, because I think I would have remembered reading them. I read one of them when I was in Gulag in Ranger School, and it seemed kind of like over the top to me. But that's a digression. I think there was one book out about like the SOF experience during the first Gulf War, and it kind of went over different units and different operations. And I think that's the only kind of contemporary one that I was even out. But it was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. So while we're in San Francisco, between like dropping acid and taking mushrooms, I was going to the recruiter. And like, I went to the Navy recruiter first because I actually knew someone who was a SEAL, a former SEAL. And so that seemed intriguing to me. So I go to the Navy recruiter and I'm like, hey, I want to be a SEAL. And they're like, well, here, take the ASVAB. So the ASVAB is like this IQ test that the military gives you. And so I took it, and I scored pretty high on it. And so they're trying to push me into like more technical MOSs, And I'm like, but no, that's not what I want.
What does MOS stand for?
Oh, sorry. If I get too jargony,
that's okay.
Please stop me.
Yeah.
Military occupational specialty, your job.
Mm-hmm.
And the Navy doesn't even call it MOS. I think they call it rate or something like that. And so I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So basically it came down to they couldn't even promise me a shot at trying out for buds, taking the PT test basically. And so I didn't know really anything about the military, but I knew enough, or I suspected enough that like, okay, I'm not going to sign anything unless I'm like guaranteed a shot. And so that's when I started talking to the Army recruiter, and they could guarantee me. So basically they gave me a Ranger contract. So Ranger Regiment's interesting in that it's pretty much the only special operations unit in the U.S. military that has privates, like has brand new soldiers. Pretty much every other unit, it's all NCOs. So that's kind of your entry level soft unit in the U.S. military is Ranger Regiment.
And so what happens?
So I finished my Mindfunk touring obligations, which went pretty much almost up until Christmas, like in just mid-December, say, and like left the band. And I think 2 months later, I was in basic training.
What were you thinking while you were in basic training?
I mean, basic training's like, it was like every movie cliche you've seen, like, happens. It's like, oh, and this is, this part. It was a necessary step, right? For the progression. It wasn't really challenging. The most challenging part about it was like not being able to do what I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it. That was like the biggest challenge for me. Your entire life, every minute of your day is controlled. So that was kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I dig this,
Right.
And but sucked it up, went through it. After what they call AIT, like Advanced Individual Training, which for me was infantry. You go through the infantry MOS training, go to airborne school, and then go to selection for regiment.
So what was the physical aspect of it like? Because it seemed like you're just partying and living life, like a rock star before that. You're just doing heroin and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, you're involved in something that's very physically grueling.
But I did prep. like I got a YMCA membership, and I was swimming at the Y. I was running. I even though I was kind of going into it somewhat blind, I knew that like I can't just show up like and not have any kind of fitness level, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I did do some prep work, and I think it served me well.
Was that the first time you had done physical stuff like that in your life?
No, I mean, I was never. I played soccer when I was a kid. Like soccer was like the one sport that didn't have that jock culture, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I gravitated towards. So and you know, I did a lot of physical outside stuff like my whole life. You know, I worked in Alaska on a fishing boat. Like, there was nothing. It wasn't foreign, you know, like physical exertion.
And so, what happens then?
Go to selection. At the time, it was called RIP, like the Ranger Indoctrination Program. Now they call it RASP, like the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, something like that. And I think it's a week longer now. But like RIP is when things got physically challenging, for sure. It was basically you just get abused for 3 weeks, basically. You know, they try to make you quit. And so like the runs, like we do these like non-standard runs and RIP. It pushed me to my limits. Like I was always kind of at the back of the pack. Like I was still with the main body, so I was keeping up. I was meeting the standard, but like right behind me were like all the dudes who were like getting put on the truck. Like you're done, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you look at that and like dig a little deeper and like keep going, you know. But yeah, I got selected, and went to 2nd Ranger Battalion.
And did you immediately get deployed? Like, what year are we talking about here?
This was 93. No, 94.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is post Desert Storm.
Yeah.
What was the environment like?
So it was Clinton era military, peacetime military. So like everything was geared towards training, right? Like there was a few dudes in my company who were like Panama vets. And so that was like 1989, I think, Just Cause. So there was some of those dudes hanging out, and I could tell they were just waiting for the next like real world op. That's all they were doing. They were biding time. And like now I get it, and I think even then I kind of got it. But for just
What do you mean by get it?
like you know that's you want to do it for real.
Mm.
You still want to train all the time.
Right.
So, yeah, it was just a lot of training. There was deployments, but it was just all training deployments. Yeah. You know, went to Ranger school, like got my Ranger tab.
And what happens after that?
I finished my enlistment. It was like a 4-year enlistment, I think. And then I got out because it was like, in a way, I kind of thought like I achieved what I aimed to achieve by going in the military, and there definitely, you know, wasn't a war on the horizon, at least one that anyone could see. So I had a break in service for a couple of years, and I kind of fucked off. Ended up going to community college, which is like another kind of funny story. If you're interested.
Sure.
So I came back to Washington basically when my mother died, and so I was kind of like dealing with her and her stuff, and it was like there's a local community college where I grew up. And like, oh, maybe I'll give this college thing a try, you know? And so I registered for some classes. But the funny thing about that story is when I was like 18, I guess, 17, like right before I graduated high school, all my friends from high school who were going to go to college, because like in my mind, I was never going to go. I was like, why am I going to go to college? Like, fuck this. You know, angry young man, dissatisfied on pretty much every level. But I was like, yeah, I'm not going to college. College has nothing for me. But I wanted to hang out with my friends, like the dudes I skateboarded with and played music with and stuff. And so they were all going to take their SATs at the local community college, like on a Saturday morning or whatever it was. And so I went with them just so I could hang out with them. And I took the SATs, but I took my SATs on acid.
How'd that go?
I have no idea. I didn't care. I never picked up, the scores. Like, it was probably just like making designs on the paper or something. Like, I at that point, like academia, like higher education, that just wasn't going to happen for me. And so, yeah, it's kind of this fuck you punk rock thing. Like, I'm going to take my SATs on acid.
Right.
So fast forward 10 years, I'm in that same room at Olympic College in a class, taking an astronomy class. And the building is still there. It's called the Rotunda, and it's this round, as you can imagine, building on campus. And yeah, so who's laughing now?
So what was your idea, like doing that, taking astronomy classes, going to college?
Again, personal growth. Like, maybe I should focus on this aspect now, like academia. Like, so I did that first 2 semesters at Olympic College, and found that I liked it. I liked going to class, and I liked taking notes, and I liked learning. And I'm like, I get it now. This whole college thing. So I finished my associates at Olympic College, and then went back in the Army. And so I was in the Special Forces qualification course, like when 9/11 happened.
And what caused you to go back in the Army?
It was a gut feeling. It was like, I don't think I'm done with this. So I went to selection, got selected, and selection, at least at the time, was good for life, basically.
So how many years were you out?
Like 2.
2 years
Yeah,
out?
not long at all.
Mm-hmm.
In I blink now and 2 years goes by. But a lot had happened personally in those 2 years. And so I'm back in the Army, doing the Special Forces qualification course, which for my MOS, like the 18 Bravo Special Forces Weapons Sergeant, was like about 1.5 years. So it was the first day of language school, which was 6 months long, was 9/11.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was it like being in the military when 9/11 went down?
It was like, I think everyone there, so there's a group of us in this building at Fort Bragg called the SOAV, the Special Operations Academic Facility. And we're, standing around the beginning of the day, like drinking coffee, getting ready to go to class. First day of class, and there's television monitors on with CNN or whatever, and we're watching the planes go into the tower. And like, I think 201, everyone knew that everything's changing right now. It's like, this is like 100% for real. And like, everyone was like, yeah,
That's how you felt?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All the training.
Yeah.
Like, finally, we're going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens then?
I'm in language school for another 6 months. So
What are you learning?
Thai
Why Thai?
is just like my unit's area of responsibility was Asia, so I had to do an Asian language, and I like Thai food. So graduate the Q course, like do a couple of J sets in Asia. So J sets, joint combined exchange training. So you basically your team goes and trains with a foreign special operations unit, and you teach them stuff, or and it's more just to like establish rapport and maybe get some access or whatever. So do a couple J sets in Asia, and then get ready to go to Iraq to prep for the invasion, like in 2002, and like spend a lot of time in Kuwait, just like training and preparing.
What was it like when you went there?
To Iraq?
Yeah.
So that was like my first like combat experience, and so it was unique in that. So my team and a couple other teams are basically attached to the 4th ID to provide kind of route reconnaissance and screening and stuff for the kind of this main conventional military, invasion. And so watching big army work, do what they do best was pretty amazing. Like tank engagements, like I never thought I'd witness that. It was just almost like and it's probably a trite cliche, but like a movie, watching this massive mechanized force just like crush everything in its path. So, yeah.
When you were over there, was any doubt that you had done the right thing by enlisting? And again,
yeah, no doubt.
No doubt at all.
Yeah.
You were geared up, ready to go.
Yeah.
So what happened when you were over there?
Got in some gunfights, hit some targets, and then redeployed back to the States.
You say that so casually. Got in gunfights and hit some targets. Like, it had to be a pretty extreme experience.
Yeah, but honestly, I think my Afghan experiences were more intense than Iraq for sure.
Yeah?
Yeah. It was a different animal.
And when did that happen?
So did some rotations in Afghanistan following the Iraq invasion. And it was kind of the more traditional, like, SF mission, like working with indigenous troops and leading them on raids and things like that.
That's got to be a wild change of life, to go from being a musician, to go from being a deployed special operator in Afghanistan. Like, the shift in consciousness is so extreme.
Maybe, but I think I'm pretty good at just with rolling with stuff. It's like, oh, this is happening now. Okay,
but that's a
Let's
big
go.
happening. It's a huge happening to be in combat.
I mean, definitely, I think the war and combat was the most profound experience of my life for sure. And I don't mean to maybe treat it lightly, because I don't take it lightly. Yeah, it's by far the most profound experience of my life.
So many guys who come back from that, not only do they say it's the most profound experience of their life, but many of them say it was the best experience of their life.
I understand that for sure. Like, I guess I could encapsulate it like this. Like, you got your dudes, your team, your little indigenous troopers, and you're gonna go crush some target. And like, I never had a doubt that like maybe I would get injured or killed, but that I never had a doubt that the mission would fail, just because the odds were just in our favor. It's like, you got night vision, you got a cast stack, you got this huge support apparatus. It's like, there's no way we're not going to win this fight. But going on target, closing with, destroying the enemy, and then getting you and all your dudes back to base alive, best feeling in the world.
Really?
Yeah.
So many guys say that.
Best feeling in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is it like? What can you describe it?
It's
or give an attempt?
I think, like, and I got my kind of evolutionary ideas about why that is. Mm-hmm. I think that we're on a very essential level, like, doing what human beings, or one of the things we're meant to do.
Or maybe one of the things we've always done. Well,
we're an adversarial species, but like every species in nature is adversarial, and it's not an evaluative statement. It's just kind of an observation. So I think on this, just the way our brains are, like, evolutionarily, like, okay, we're the monkeys with the big brains, right? Mm-hmm. And we've created this very technologically advanced, if not challenging, environment now that we live in. But the way our firmware up here, we're still hominids on the savannah, like 100%. And so I think through war, through combat, we kind of tap into that primal, okay, this is what we're supposed to do, And
was that surprising to have that part of your mind sort of ignited in a sense where you realize that like this is like something that's deeply embedded in your DNA?
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm making that claim, but it's not based on like scientific research I've done. It's just kind of an intuition.
Well, many make that claim.
Yeah,
it's not an uncommon thought.
Yeah, so it rings true to me. And like, have you read like that Sebastian Junger book,
Yes.
Tribe?
Yeah. Great book.
Yeah. And like his thesis, like that's the first kind of PTSD thesis I read that kind of rang true with me. Because like before that, the popular conception was, these young men and women go off to war and see horrible things and come back fucked up. But like his thesis where they lose that tribe, right? That task and purpose, unity of effort, literally we're tribal creatures. Like that's how we operate. Like I did a paper when I was doing my undergrad. I think I was trying to investigate like genetic impetus for like human conflict or whatever. And like during my research, one of the things I found that was super interesting to me was the way psychologically we're equipped to deal with about 100 to 120 individuals. Like that would be our extended tribe, our social group.
Dunbar's number.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this group of people that you can contain in your mind.
Yeah.
And it's segmented. There's like a small number of people that you're intimately attached to. There's a larger number that are close but more like associates, friends. And then there's people that and it extends out. It actually extends even further than 120 or 150. It gets to like people you are aware of.
Yeah.
But it's fairly small, which is one of the weird things about knowing a lot of people.
Yeah.
That number gets really weird, and then your memory of people, it's almost like your brain deletes them because there's no room.
But then it's like, how well do you know them as well?
Right.
Like how intimate is that relationship? But an interesting correlation I made, like researching this paper, was that number is the same number in Army Task Organization as an infantry company is 120, and that's kind of like your main operational unit in the infantry at least. Like SOF, you're dealing with smaller teams, smaller numbers, but I thought, wow, 120, that's it. And is that by design, or is that just the way it worked out?
It goes back to our tribal roots, most likely, that we evolved being accustomed to that group of people, that number of people, or a similar number.
Yeah, I mean, just survival. Like our mission statement is biological organisms. Even like the big brain monkeys that we are, it's like survive and replicate the gene.
Yeah.
And like everything else is kind of window dressing,
Right.
It's like, and like you can window dress it however you want to make it seem more important than that. But I'm a huge fan of the window dressing. Like that's definitely the salt in the soup for sure. But if you boil it down to, it's, what is the quiddity of being a human being? It's that, or any biological organism, like survive and replicate the gene. And so the whole capacity for combat, for human warfare, is like, even as an individual, if you're killed in combat, if you go back to like this group of hominids on the savannah, you're probably related to everyone in your group. So it's like, okay, maybe I won't pass my genes on, but my cousin over here will. So I'm going to support that effort. So I think that kind of organized conflict, one group against another, is in support of that. Like, I think anthropologists have a term for it, pseudo kinship, where, say, in a combat situation, so you got like the classic scenario of like a dude jumping on a hand grenade to save his buddies, you know, and that's hardwired. That's not a conscious decision, you know, because I think if you had time to actually think about it, maybe you wouldn't do it,
right?
You know, but it's that pseudo kinship, like that. I think that's, and to me, that's always what's been, I think, the most interesting paradox about war and combat is it's this event, this human event, that simultaneously brings about acts of pure selfless love and brutality without quarter in the same instant. So that's always intrigued me.
Well, it's always fascinating for me to talk to people that are intelligent like yourself that have experienced that, because that thread that you're expressing, it seems to ring true with almost all of them. That there's something about it that, although brutal and maybe in some ways unexpected, it also rings true with like a purpose, and that your life is intimately connected to these people, and in some way that becomes more satisfying than any other way to live. Yeah, and to hear a person like yourself, who's obviously very smart, express that, it's really interesting to someone like myself who hasn't experienced that but kind of understands what you're saying.
I'm sure you do. I mean, I'm sure it rings true with you, right?
Yeah.
Like just intuitively. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're aware of this while you're experiencing, because you're obviously an analytical person, so you're aware of this while you're experiencing it.
So I can think of instances where I've had these flashes of awareness. Like, okay, I remember one target, like we halved in, like a helicopter assault force. So I was on the second 47. No, I think I was on the second lift. Like, it's a pretty big element going in. And I remember landing in this poppy field, like stepping off the ramp, and like I could hear gunfire. Like it was already on, right, on target. And so I got my little Afghan commando troopers. So like, okay, man, let's go. And like, I remember running up this hill, and I was aware in that moment, like, okay, this is odd, that this is, you know, the cliche of like running to the gunfire. And I believe me, I don't consider myself like a heroic person at all. It wasn't even a conscious decision. I was doing it. And it was like I was trying to get there as quickly as I could. And it did occur to me, like, yeah, this is kind of weird, you know?
But it is your training, and it also is your purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know which supervenes on what, but yeah, for sure.
How bizarre was it, the whole poppy fields thing? Because I remember one of the most interesting aspects of the war was that we were protecting poppy fields. And there was this weird video, I don't know if you've ever seen it, of Geraldo Rivera, who was on Fox News, spinning this in some sort of a way, but realizing how ridiculous it sounded while he was interviewing a general who was on the field, or I don't remember, it was a general soldier who was on the field, who was explaining why they were doing this, that they were guarding the poppy fields so that these people could keep making heroin.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you're looking at this, and especially someone who has a knowledge of Vietnam, that it was intimately connected with drug running, and that there was a lot of that going on. That was part of the purpose of it, and that somewhere someone was profiting off of this to the tune of billions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And you're not exactly sure how it was being done or what involvement the United States military had in it. But in this particular instance, you're living in the era of social media and the internet. Not necessarily social media, but at least the internet, where people are very aware of things like that are at the very least inconsistent with the narrative that we have here in America, that drugs are bad people sell drugs, bad people make drugs, we have to stop the drugs from getting into the country. Now here you are we're watching Geraldo Rivera, a Fox reporter, putting this like really clunky spin on why we have to do this. And I can only imagine it's because it had already been exposed that the United States was doing that, and they had to say, well, we have to come up with some sort of an excuse for why we're guarding heroin production.
So I guess my understanding of if the U.S. mill was doing that is probably like a secondary consideration, because like at least down south, like that's a huge part of the economy. It's like opium production.
Yeah.
And I would guess it would be eradicating like the poppy fields would be a worse choice, like economically destabilizing like these people who are already super poor.
But it's also for sure aiding in the profit of selling heroin.
Oh, I mean the Taliban would make money from opium production.
Yeah.
Even though it's against Islam or whatever. It's it was. I don't know how to crack that nut.
Was that talked about over there?
Yeah, I mean, like I know DEA was over there doing their thing.
What were they doing? Selling it?
I don't know. Like,
well, that's what's so strange is that it seems like, especially when you have this disconnection from the mainstream media and from channels of information getting to other people, that this is a part of what's happening over there. That I believe at one point in time it was 90+% of the world's heroin. Yeah, was coming from Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer.
Bizarre though, right?
Yeah.
Did you think how bizarre it was or was just that was inconsequential? That was not.
Yeah, it wasn't like another poppy field. Like it was just part of the landscape, But I probably didn't put much thought into it.
How did they cultivate the pot? I mean, they were doing all this in the middle of combat, in the middle of war. Like, how were they handling all that?
I mean, like in my experience, like if we did hit a target that was like in a remote place like that, like they weren't seeing coalition forces often, if at all. It's kind of like they probably thought they were in a safe haven. So. I mean, I think when you get closer to the built-up areas, and at least at the time, I mean, like the whole Afghan government was so corrupt anyway. So I think probably the main people making money were, Afghan generals. Which I think at one time the Afghan army had like 3,000 general officers or something. That like this inverted pyramid of leadership. Like, oh, I'm a general, and they all have mansions and it's all corruption money. And
How weird was that? Being a part, like that's the side that you were on. I mean, you're over there sort of helping.
Yeah, like I think you just gotta focus on the tribe, right? Like it's like you and your dudes, and you have this task, and you're gonna accomplish it to the best of your ability, and bring everyone back alive. And then the political side of it, I mean, yeah, it'd be easy to get kind of demoralized.
Yeah, that's what I'm at.
If you focus on that.
Yeah. Was it bizarre for you, as someone who has done heroin, to think like, oh, this is where it comes from?
I mean, I think I was conscious of that, but like it wasn't that crazy. It's like.
So even though you knew that there's rampant corruption and that there's a lot of things that were kind of fucked, it was still your tribe, your task.
Yep.
Did you spend any time pondering like whether or not that made sense, or did you just do what you were supposed to do?
Yeah, I think I reflected on it and then would just do it.
Did anybody talk about it over there?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, and I would talk about it too. Like as the war progressed, you would see these mansions being built around Kabul and stuff. These ridiculous like concrete mansions, and like that's our tax dollars are paying for that mansion. Or it's corruption money, or it's opium money, or whatever. And it's just part of the culture there. Like how do you fix that? It's like I remember talking to one of our interpreters over there, and like so I'm not married, don't have a family, And so obviously everything over there is very family oriented, or family tribe. That everything's geared towards like blood relations and things like that, and the stronger and larger your family is, the stronger your tribe is. Like that whole thing. It's like a different paradigm than we have in the West. And so we're just bullshitting, and he's asking me about my family, and I'm like, oh, I don't have a family, just me. But my neighbor has the keys to my house, and they can go in and take care of stuff if I need something taken care of and all this. And like the first thing he asks is like, and they do not steal all your things? Because that's what he was thinking.
Right.
Like, oh, if I had your keys, I'd be stealing your shit.
Right.
And that's the mentality. Like that.
Yeah.
It's different. The houses down there, each family unit house is a miniature fortress. And it's because it's this culture that they habitually prey upon each other.
Mm.
So the houses need to be these mini fortresses. Where here in the West, like I don't have a fence around my property. My neighbors have my keys. Like it's fine.
Yeah. How bizarre was that though, to go over there and experience this completely different way of life with other human beings living on another part of the world, a completely different set of values, different goals and expectations, different religion.
It was fascinating.
Yeah.
Like just because that part of the world, like Central Asia, is like such a fascinating part of the world, like all the way back to antiquity.
Mm-hmm.
All the history that's like transpired, in that area. Any chance I got to see something like somewhat historical, like there's still remains of like Greek ruins from 300 BC.
Really?
Yeah.
In Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. There was I never got to this town, but up on the Oxus River, there's been several attempts over the decades to do an archaeological excavation of the entire city, but it's a no shit Greek city in Central Asia.
Wow.
So when Alexander of Macedon, when Alexander of Macedon,
Alexander the Great.
yeah, was his campaign in Asia, so he pushed all the way to the Indus River, but what he would do along the way is establish Alexandrias. So Alexandria in Egypt, but there's multiple Alexandrias. Like the etymology of Kandahar, the town in Afghanistan, is, if you go back, it was Iskandahar, and Iskandahar literally means Alexandria. That was one of the Alexandrias.
Wow.
That he established in Central Asia and all over Persia and Asia Minor, and like that was the thing. And so it was a way to kind of maintain a foothold in that part of the world, like build a city, establish like a Greek education system to educate the locals in the Greek model. So he was kind of projecting, he was in it for the long game. Like this is part of Greece. It's going to be Greek.
Mm.
And the Greco-Bactrian empire, if you want to call it that, probably lasted like 100 years, and then it just fell apart.
Is there like documentation of the Greek cities, the ruins in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Jamie, can you pull some of that up so you can find any of that? That's fascinating. I had no idea.
So the old Alexandria.
So here it is. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so that's just abandoned now?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is from 300 BC?
Yeah, around that.
Wow. That's amazing. I had no idea. So at one point in time, that had been some sort of a thriving community.
Yeah, the city on the Oxus, Iconium. See where it says Iconium, Wikipedia? That was the city on the Oxus.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So they had an amphitheater.
Yeah, it was a full-on Greek city.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is wild. And so how did they maintain it, and how did it collapse?
I mean, I don't know,
Look at that. That's intense, man.
but that's up north in like Kunduz.
What is that statue, Jamie, where it says the history? Yeah.
It's a Buddhist statue.
Yeah,
It's a Buddha statue.
the Buddhas of Bamyan, like the Taliban blew those up.
Oh, right. Fuck. What a bummer.
Yeah.
How old were those?
That I'm not sure. But there's a lot of historians think that like the Vedas and Buddhism kind of started like more in the Afghanistan area.
Really?
Yeah.
No kidding. The Vedas.
Yeah.
Wow. Look at all these Buddhas.
Yeah, there's tons of there's some really cool. So there was this really interesting period of history of Greco-Buddhism in Central Asia. There was one of the Greco-Bactrian kings, Menander, actually converted to Buddhism, and there was this brief moment of brief period of Greco-Buddhism in Central Asia, and so the Buddhas that were carved. So they're carving statues of the Buddha and stuff, but it's in this total Greco-Roman style. So they're beautiful pieces of art, and it's literally a Greek Buddha. You know, you look at it stylistically, and it's like that's Greek, but it's a Buddha, and it's cool, you know, flash in the pan of history. You know,
see if you can find any images of that. Are those all gone? The Taliban blow them all up?
No, I mean these. So there's actually some at the Met in New York that I've seen. I've seen some at the National Museum in Kabul.
Look at that.
So yeah,
That's so strange because it's so obviously like influenced by Greek art.
yeah, the folds in the robe and all that. Yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
it's really cool, really interesting.
Human civilization is so bizarre. The rise and fall of these empires and these civilizations, and for you to go and visit it in the middle of combat must have been particularly bizarre.
Yeah, like I would try to get in, do my share of, for lack of a better term, like tourism. Like I went to the old citadel outside of Kandahar, where right now when you're on the ground it doesn't look like anything, but if you go to like Google Earth, you can see the old outline of the city walls, and you could see the citadel in the middle, and it's like it's still there, the remains of it. Like up in Nuristan, which is a super interesting part of Afghanistan. It's like the northeast part of the country, and it's a region that wasn't even converted to Islam until the end of the 19th century. Like you can make the analogy of they're like the Basque in Spain, right? It was like this mountainous region that kind of was able to retain like its cultural and linguistic identity because of the terrain. Like it was more defendable. So Nuristan was like that as well. And so they were finally forcibly converted to Islam into the 19th century. And before that, they were called Kafiristan, which is like land of the infidel. And then once they underwent the conversion process, they became Nuristan, which is land of the enlightened.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But it's such an interesting place. I liked it a lot because it reminded me of home where I grew up, because you have like alpine forest. It looks like Yosemite. Like if they could ever have peace there, they could have like a trekking industry, you know, ecotourism, whatever, like White River rafting down the Kunar River, like is gorgeous. And there was places where in Afghanistan where I was like, I could be home on the Olympic Peninsula right now.
Wow.
Like mountains, alpine forest. Yeah, there's the old citadel.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I had no idea this stuff was there.
Yeah.
The history of Afghanistan is so fascinating and so spectacular, and so like the futility of trying to conquer that place. and control that place.
It's gonna be what it's gonna be, and like you're not gonna change it. You know, you're not gonna westernize it. It's not gonna happen.
Did you like? It's so crazy that we were there for so long.
It's a 20-year war.
Would you have ever imagined that while you were there?
No. Like if you would have told me September 10th, 2001, like, oh yeah, we're getting ready to be in a 20-year war in the Middle East and Central Asia, I would have been like, no fucking way. That's just not going to happen, you know. And then boom.
What was it like to you when we pulled out of it finally?
On the one hand, it was like a relief. It's like, you know, enough already. It's like we're obviously not fixing that place. You know, it's doubtful we could fix it. I think it would have been clever to hold on to Bagram and maintain a strike force there to put out fires, so to speak. But other than that, like, let it be what it's going to be, you know, and like protect U.S. interests as needed. But, you know, we're not going to change that place. It's
so crazy that we didn't learn from the Russian invasion. We didn't learn from the Russians' battle in the Mujahideen, and which we supported, which is, it's so strange that everyone makes the same mistakes.
Or the British, or the Greeks, you know.
Yeah.
It's like the Greek foothold there lasted, you know, what, 100 years? Like, so historically, that's nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like, there's no place like it on Earth in that regard. Just like, because of the terrain, because of the people and the religion and the way it's controlled, areas are controlled by warlords.
Yeah, it's all tribal. It's all, and that's the way they, politically, that's the way they govern themselves, and that's just the, you know, and it's not even an evaluative statement. It's like, yeah, it's not Western style, but okay, you know, what are you gonna do? You know,
right.
They gotta, at some point, as long as they're not impinging upon. It's a, I guess I have a very libertarian perspective. Like, you know, if they don't fuck with us, we shouldn't fuck with them.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, there's a futility in trying to be the policeman of the world. And
it's exhausting.
Yeah.
You know, and ultimately you're gonna fail. You know, you're gonna drain all your resources trying to manage something literally on the other side of the planet. To what end?
Right.
You know?
And then there's these entities that are profiting off of that futile attempt, which they would like to continue that money flowing in. So they continue this thing that everybody knows you're eventually going to have to stop.
Yeah, definitely it turned into an industry for sure.
And were you aware of that while you were there, that there was no way out of this?
I mean, I guess I always suspected that it would never be, like, it wasn't going to be like, hey, check this out, democracy. It's cool.
Right.
You know, like, I pretty much knew that wasn't going to fly. I think the best I could hope for was just stability, you know?
And that didn't happen.
No.
You know, there was some really bizarre moments after we pulled out of Afghanistan where they were interviewing the Taliban and talking to them about women being in control, or women, you know, being in government, and whether or not they were going to accept sort of this Western idea of diversity and inclusion, and they were just fucking laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absurd to them.
Yeah.
You know? Just like the other side of the coin is absurd to us. You know? So how do you bridge that gap?
Especially when you're dealing with the history of the place, the you know, hundreds and hundreds of years of living that way. The idea that we're going to go in there with tanks and fix it.
We're going to force you to be democratic.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's not going to happen either.
And also the rampant corruption that exists in the people that are in power. You know, when you're talking about all these mansions and the selling of the heroin, it's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to get those people to straighten out? You're not.
Yeah. it's ingrained. It's cultural. It's maybe even more than cultural. You know.
Was there a time when you were over there, like towards the end of your time there, where you were recognizing the futility of this?
Yeah, I think big pictures. Yeah, but again, you're there to do a job, so you can't dwell on the negative. You know.
Right.
And it's like you need to believe in the mission. You know, and I believed in the mission as far as like myself and my teammates, like we're gonna do what we have to do and do it to the best of our ability, and everyone come home alive. You know.
Yeah. Complete your task.
Mm-hmm.
Support your tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah. How long were you over there for?
I did like 4 rotations. So I left the Army the second time, like 2007, when I was basically went back to school.
What was it like to make that transition from being over there in one of the most bizarre wars we've ever been a part of, and then going back to school and going back to civilized society and going back to Western culture?
Again, I think just my disposition, I tend to just go with things.
You have a very unusual disposition.
Really? I don't know. Like, I think 4 out of 5 ex-girlfriends polled would suggest I'm good at compartmentalizing things.
4 out of 5?
Yeah.
What about the 5th?
No, I'm guessing. No, it's just I made the transition. I thought, well, it's like, okay, cool. I'm in school, like now working on this chapter. You know.
Why do you think some people struggle so much, and you were able to sort of at least fairly smoothly make that transition?
I don't have the answer to that. I don't know.
Did you have friends that struggled?
I mean, most of my friends from the military are soft guys.
Yeah.
And I think in general, like, they're adaptable. You know, I think that's kind of a soft a special operations soldier criteria is you need to be flexible and adaptable and quick on your feet like that.
And more resilient. They're
Yeah.
more resilient human beings.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, I would think so too. At least my experience with them. I've had conversations with special forces guys where they explain to me the reason why less of them experience the kind of PTSD that some of the other guys had. And they said because we were proactive. We weren't reactive. We were going and doing things. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like we're sitting around waiting to be attacked. Mm-hmm. And some of the guys that are sitting around waiting to be attacked, the anxiety of that was kind of overwhelming.
I could see that, yeah. If you're just sitting on a fob, like, mm-hmm. waiting for that rocket attack, yeah.
Yeah. And so you come back in 2007 and you decided you're done? That's it?
Yeah, so I was at another crossroads, and it was like I can re-enlist or I can go to university. So I applied. A friend of mine in New York was like, "You're pretty smart. You should apply to Columbia." And I was like, I would never get accepted there. You know, that's not going to happen. And so almost as a joke, I applied to Columbia, and I applied to Seattle University as well. Only two schools I applied to, and ended up getting accepted to both. And so with the Columbia thing, it was like, okay, am I going to step up to the challenge or, you know, go, I mean, not necessarily the easier route, but maybe the more comfortable route, which would have been Seattle U. And I went for Columbia. It's like, okay, challenge accepted, you know.
And what did you study in Columbia?
Philosophy. A lot of money in philosophy. I don't know if you knew that.
I heard it's right up there with gender studies.
Yeah.
Would you like some coffee?
Yeah, please.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So how much time did you do there?
So they accepted a lot of my Olympic college credits, shockingly, and they accepted my military language school for my language requirement. So I basically had to do 3 years there to finish my undergrad.
And then you went to graduate school as well?
I had a break, but yeah, ended up going to graduate school in 2016 maybe.
And what do you do now?
So now I mostly do yacht delivery.
Yacht delivery?
Yeah, sailboats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And was that like, how did that come about?
So there's a story there.
Okay.
Okay, let me organize this real quick in my head. Like 2014. Okay, so I finished my undergrad. I was now holder of an Ivy League degree, like much to my chagrin. And I went through a personal crisis that was pretty bad. It was almost up there with like the Soundgarden personal crisis. And so I kind of did a similar thing where it's like, okay, I need to take some time off, to do some work on myself, And so how that translated was I'd always been really interested in Argentina as a country and as a place. So I got a flat in Buenos Aires and went and lived there for a couple months and kind of did this deep period of introspection. But during this time, before I left, a good friend of mine suggested this book called Dove, written by a man named Robin Lee Graham. And so he's like, hey, I just read this book. You should read it. I think you'd really dig it. And I didn't even know what it was about. So I found a used copy and took it with me down there and read it. And so it's the story. I don't know if you've even heard of this story of Robin Graham, but he did. I think he started in 1967. He did a solo circumnavigation in a sailboat that took him about 5 years to do. But at the time, he was the youngest person to ever do that. He started when he was like 15, and it was like it got a lot of press. Like National Geographic covered it. I think he's been on the cover of National Geographic like 3 times. And so it's an interesting account. His solo circumnavigation took him 5 years. Along the way, he met this woman, Patty, like this young, pretty hippie chick, like somewhere in the South Pacific, and they fell in love and like got married. And she would kind of meet him in different spots as he finished the circumnavigation. And then the book ends. He returns to Los Angeles, circumnavigation complete. And I'm like super cynical, like going, okay, what happened now, And I'm like, I bet that marriage didn't last, because after something, I guess I equated it to like a war zone romance or something, where you're kind of in this super heightened environment. So if you bring it back to just normal life, like, does it survive? Like, is like what made it interesting or exciting or whatever, Do you kind of get back to reality and it's like, you're not that interesting or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I'm super cynical. Like, that marriage didn't last, whatever. So, but then I started doing some internet research on Robin Graham, and turns out he wrote like a second book called The Sailor Returns from the Sea or something like that. So what had happened, and he did go through kind of a dark period after the circumnavigation that I won't get into, because I bet he told me about it personally. So he and Patty in like the early 1970s, so they get back from like 5 years, sailing the world basically. It's pre-internet, the communication that we have now. So obviously 1965 to 1970 was a pretty turbulent period in like American history. And so Robin essentially missed all that. And he gets back to the States, and was it Stanford? I think Stanford offered him a full ride scholarship. So he went for a semester and basically couldn't deal with all these lefty professors, and like, I'm out of here. And so he and Patty loaded up, bought like a mail truck, I think, loaded up all their stuff and went to Montana and homesteaded in Montana, like super old school, like 19th century homestead.
Wow.
And so I'm doing this research, and it's like, oh, Kalispell, Montana. My buddy Mike from Ranger Battalion lives in Kalispell, Montana. So I'm in my flat in Buenos Aires, and I email Mike. I'm like, hey, dude, you know a guy in Kalispell named Robin Graham? Like 30 minutes later, I get an email. It's like, yeah, I saw him in Costco yesterday. And it's like, no fucking way. And so, hey, can you do like an email introduction for me? And he's like, yeah. And so, fast forward to today, I'm very happy and proud to call Robin and Patty friends, like amazing human beings, like so cool. And so the sailing thing, to bring it back, like reading Dove and like getting to know Robin and stuff, I started getting interested in sailing. And like I live in Western Washington on Puget Sound. Like it's a very nautical culture, and I've worked on boats in Alaska and actually come from kind of a nautical family on my father's side. Like they all worked on tugboats on the Columbia River. My grandfather, my dad, my uncles. My dad was a commercial fisherman in Alaska. Like ran his own boat for decades, and so it seemed like kind of a natural thing. Like I've always been attracted to boats in the water. So I started looking, did the practical thing, started looking for a sailboat. And I found one for sale that was about 10 miles from my house, but I knew nothing about sailboats. So I'm like pinging people I know who do know stuff about sailboats. I'm like, hey, is this boat any good? Look at the pictures, look at the year and the design and everything. So it was a 1986 Jeanneau Sunrise 34 sloop. And like all these people are like, yeah, it's a good boat. Like, yeah, and the price is right. So I'm watching it, and the price kept dropping. And then it got low enough where it's like it was kind of in my realm. So I contacted the broker, and like actually went down and looked at the boat, like did a walkthrough. And I was like, so is the seller taking offers on this? And he's just like, yeah, make one. And so I had some deployment money saved up, and I could pile up about 17 grand. And so at the time, so I offered 17,000, and like half hour later, it's like, you got a boat. Wow. So, that was the beginning of my personal, sailing adventures.
Did you live on it?
Nope.
My folks did that for a while. When they retired, my mom and my stepdad decided to live on a sailboat. They flew around the Keys. They went down to the Bahamas. They just decided to just live on a boat for a while until my mom got bored with it. Yeah. My mom was like, let's go to fucking place. This is ridiculous. But I think it was a very educational and an enlightening experience to just live in nature on the ocean for a while. That's very that's a wanderlust appeal to a lot of people, to just get on a boat and live on a boat and wake up and have coffee on the ocean, just exist out there.
Yeah, I bought the boat with the intent, at least the vague intent, of doing a circumnavigation of my own. Just cause,
really?
Yeah, because it seems like what appeals to me about sailing is, outside of like electronic navigational aids, it's the same as it's always been. It's like you and the boat and the sea and the wind, and you got to make it work. And there's something like really like when you actually get out on the water and you got the sails up and you're on a good tack and the boat's doing its thing, it's an awesome feeling. It's like, I'm not going to quite say it's primal, because obviously hominids on the savannah didn't have sailboats, but it's close to that.
It's obviously very appealing. People love to do it. And the sailboat thing is like, that's like the highest level of expression of nautical experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think like being a true sailor is like sailing.
Yeah.
You know, and like even at the Navy Academy at Annapolis, like the ensigns, they put them on sailboats to teach them to be sailors. You know, like on that very fundamental level, and it's like anything else. It's like being a soldier or a musician, or like I think you have to master the fundamentals, because if you suck at the fundamentals, you're going to suck at everything else. And so I've always focused on fundamentals. I mean, mainly because I'm not naturally good at anything really. Like I've always had to try, and so in the service of trying to be good at something, I've always focused on the fundamentals and trying to master them, and hopefully just have a good foundation. I mean, that's one thing that was like unique about growing up as like a soldier in Ranger Battalion, because Ranger Battalion's like super, like regiment's a unique animal. Like even within the military, even within the soft community, it's its own thing culturally, and they always stress the fundamentals. And you know, it's like being a private in Ranger Regiment it's not easy, but the fact that it's hard, I would think makes you a better soldier, because there's like NCOs in Ranger Regiment don't tolerate anything less than 100%, you know. And if you bring anything less than 100%, you're going to find out really quick, and usually in a way that's not pleasant. And so I think having that foundation as a Ranger private, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm any kind of amazing soldier, but I think it made me the best soldier that I could be, for sure. And I'll always look back at Regiment as like being a very key event in my life, like my time there.
Well, I think that any particularly difficult endeavor strengthens your resolve in basically everything you do in life. And when you're forced to do something that's very, very hard to do, it just changes who you are at a foundational level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's that punctuated equilibrium that I referenced earlier. It's like you need that traumatic event to be a catalyst for growth.
Yeah.
You know?
These big events in life that change the progression of the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And then you look back and go, wow, what would have happened if not for that moment, or if not for that experience?
Mm-hmm.
So did you decide not to circumnavigate the globe?
I mean, that's like a huge endeavor. It would take, I think, at a minimum a year. And like, I don't know when the last time you had a free year.
I don't have any time.
Like even the first year of COVID, it was like, and it was the most free time I probably had in my adult life. And it was still like not a lot, you know? So it's something, I would still love to do it. I think being able to go, like there's islands in the South Atlantic or even in the Pacific that they don't have an airport. The only way you're going to get there is by boat, you know? And I think that'd be really cool to see, like some of kind of the last, like, you can't say unexplored, but kind of the last like remote places on the planet.
I would also imagine you would meet some very fascinating people that are also doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
So like the sailing, like kind of the 50-meter target right now with sailing is, have you ever heard of Race to Alaska?
No.
So it's this adventure race, kind of a quirky adventure race that's based back home where I live. And it's a boat race from Port Townsend, Washington to Ketchikan, Alaska. And there's really only one cardinal rule, and there's a lot of other rules, but they're pretty much deal with like safety at sea and things like that. But the one cardinal rule of the race is no motor. the vessel has to be either wind powered, human powered, but no internal combustion or electric engines. So,
how long is that journey?
I think generally you could do it in a week. It's about 750 miles. So they changed the rules last year so before you could only go up the inside passage, like the east side of Vancouver Island, and it's very constrained waterways, and like current's always an issue because a lot of like there's pretty big tides up there, like a 12-foot tide in that part of the country is normal, and so you get these big tides and constrained waterways, and they turn into rivers. So if you don't hit the current right, hit the tide right, you're gonna have to anchor up somewhere and just wait for the tide to change. So there's those challenges. But anyway, they changed the rules last year where you could go up the Pacific side, like just go up the Straits of Juan de Fuca, hang a right, and just go up the Pacific. So that's what I intend to do, because you'll have good wind pretty much the whole time. It'd be a little sloppier, but you're not going to deal with the tides and currents. You're not going to deal with the ship traffic in the inside passage. You're not going to deal with like floating logs that you can hit at night. Like there's all these like things that make it less appealing to me, for sure.
What do you do at night in those circumstances? It's pitch black outside. You have no motor.
So I got a crew of 3. So the team is called Super Nautiloid. It's like it's a reference to my favorite Black Sabbath record, and like did a logo and everything. So right now in the process of refitting the boat, and so it's a pretty big project. So right now everything's going okay, like trying to raise money, like set up a GoFundMe page through the Super Nautiloid site in order to fill the gaps, financially, because it is a pretty big project. Been doing most of the work myself so far. But yeah, the team of 4, it's me, 2 other veterans, 1 friend from Ranger Battalion, 1 friend from SF, and then I got a buddy from the Seattle Rock days, Barrett Martin, who was the drummer for the Screaming Trees, and he's played in a few other bands, and he's actually a Grammy Award-winning producer, like super interesting guy. Actually, you'd dig him. You should have him on the show. He's also an ethnomusicologist. So he's gone down to Peru and recorded the like Shipibo shaman, like Icaros, the ayahuasca songs, and he's doing a record now like called Deep Amazon, where the concept is he has all these Icaros that he recorded down in Peru, and then he's bringing in various musicians to accompany these Icaros on guitar or whatever instrument. So like I play on it, Kim and Matt from Soundgarden play on it, Peter Buck from REM plays on it. So it's kind of this interesting cast of characters supporting these Shipibo Icaros. So the record comes out October, I guess, and any profits that are made are going to go back to the tribe. So it's kind of cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So how much time have you been spending sailing that you're interested in doing this? Have you dedicated a lot of your time to that? Yeah.
Like as much free time as I can. I love getting out on the boat, getting the sails up and just going. I like even just like sleeping on the boat. Like when my boat was moored at this one marina close to my house.
Is that your boat?
That's my boat getting hauled out.
Yeah. Wow.
So
a real sailboat.
So the boat name is funny. So remember when I was talking about koala macrame? Mm-hmm. So needs bottom paint bad. That's on the to-do list. But I'd modified the name if I ever had a daughter to Gita Alexandra. So it's a name that at once is beautiful and strong. Mm-hmm. So that was the concept. But like, I'm probably never gonna have a daughter. So
do you have kids?
No.
No kids?
No wife, no ex-wives, no kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
How'd you skate through life without?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it wasn't planned. I mean, maybe on a subconscious level, just due to my childhood, I probably avoided it subconsciously.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people with traumatic childhoods or unpleasant childhoods, they say, I don't want to bring that on anybody else.
Yeah.
Because you associate what childhood is and what, being a parent is with what you experienced. You don't think there's another way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I've had friends who'd be like, "Oh, you'd be an awesome dad," and I'm like,
I bet you would.
I don't know, man.
Yeah.
And then I don't like going down that road, and then it turns out like, oh, I do suck. Like,
you'd
horrible.
Adjust.
You
talked about your flexibility. You'd adjust. You'd get better at it. It's a strange experience. It's very psychedelic.
Do you have kids?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have 3 daughters.
Yeah.
Having children is seeing a little person and engaging with them and having them grow with you and learning about life, and in a lot of ways it gives you a chance to do it the right way. Like you think about what's happened to you and you learn from that, and you learn from your mistakes in raising them, and you learn how to communicate with little people that are just sort of growing and learning. It's very educational. It's very fascinating. It just changes you fundamentally as a human being. It changes everything about you.
I could imagine, like, because again, going back to just the evolutionary thing, you're kind of fulfilling your mission.
Yes.
As an organism. It
in that way, like it really does speak to your DNA. There's something about it, but it's like Dave Chappelle said this to me once. It's a great quote. He said, becoming a father didn't just change the amount of love that I have, it changed my capacity for love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very accurate. But, some people, their demons don't line up with that endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
Their whatever it is in their life doesn't line up with it, and they don't make those adjustments because you're going to have to adjust. You're going to have to change your priorities. You change who you are. You change how you think about people. It's what's fascinating with me is I always felt about people that there were these static things. Like, I met Mike. He's 70. That's Mike. He's always been 70. And then you have children and raise children and see them grow from the time they're a little baby to a person who's having a conversation with you that you go to dinner with,
mm-hmm.
you go to the movies with. And all their life experiences and the good ones and the bad ones. And it's just, I look at people now like babies. I look at everybody like they're a baby. It's very weird. I go, I wonder what you were like as a baby. Because you obviously got to this point from being, I see in my mind, or at least I envision this journey now to get to who you are now. I give people a lot more slack because of it. Mm-hmm. A lot more. I'm so much more charitable with people and their behavior and their attitudes because of that. Because I realize that a lot of what life is determinism. It's not just free will and who you are. A lot of it is the experiences that were thrust upon you and how you had to react to those experiences, and what you were taught and who you're, I have friends with horrible parents, and that battle to deal with these motherfuckers that raised you is like, it's like a constant thing in their life that they never quite get past. And I was very fortunate that my mom, when she married my stepdad, they're very close, and they've been close most of my life. So I've experienced bad, and then I've also experienced like what it's like when a relationship works and when people are kind to each other and get along together. And it's like, so you realize like there's adjustments that everyone can make in this life to make the path smoother, and to make it more just, more harmonious. But it really changed how I think about humans. Like, not just like my humans, but all humans, like everyone that I meet. I really think of them as babies. It's very strange, but I think it's kind of I sort of decided to think that way because I was recognizing like the way kids like sort of adopt your thoughts on things. And my kids talk a lot of shit. They're very funny. because in my house we talk a lot of shit. We're always making fun of things, making fun of each other, and there's a lot of laughs because, that's what I do. I'm a comedian. And to see my kids talk shit and say funny things, it's like, oh my God, I know where you got that from. It's very obvious, but it's also they're very kind too, which is that makes me very proud. It's very, very nice to be able to raise children in an environment where when they get older, you see them expressing the values that you appreciate and that you think are important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see, and I've thought
It's
about
not
it
too
before.
late.
Yeah, I guess that's the
Probably still got some swimmers in there.
the advantage of having the XY chromosome.
Yeah, it is a big advantage, for women. And I know women that forgot to have kids. I mean, I say it that way. They didn't forget to have kids, but in our modern Western world, when people prepare for their life, they prepare for what society has established as the path that is the most celebrated, which is financial success,
Mm-hmm.
and a career that is something not just that you would be proud of, but that someone would respect. Like this is Debbie, she's a lawyer, and she's a partner at her firm. Like, oh, Debbie's happy. And then you meet Debbie and you're like, oh, Debbie's miserable.
Mm-hmm.
She's very successful, but it's not harmonious. She's not happy. And that's, it's so hard when you're in the middle of it and you're thinking so much about how other people view you. And for a lot of people, for whatever reason, they grew up in a way that they didn't get the respect that they deserved, or they were taught that the only way to get respect or the only way to be appreciated or to not feel like a failure is to be financially successful.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the biggest failures that I know are financially successful.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the biggest messes of a life that I know are people that on paper are winners,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not. They're just a disaster. And they're filled with nonsense, and they don't value human experiences and love and camaraderie and creativity and education and just extracting the most fun and the most satisfying life out of this experience. Instead, they're concentrating on money.
Mm-hmm.
They want to talk to you about numbers and expansion and are you investing, and I have a business I'd like you to be a part of, and there's a this and then that, and I was like, oh. And you don't realize that it's gonna fucking end, man. And you don't realize it, I think, sometimes until someone close to you does die, and then you go, oh, this is so temporary and I'm not enjoying this process at all.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I'm getting out of talking to you is that you have sought out these difficult but educational experiences, and that's what makes someone fascinating. That's what makes someone cool to talk to. The path of the most boring people to talk to are the people that are just thinking about making money. They're so fucking boring. It's so brutal talking to them because they have this very narrow thing that they're obsessed with, and that thing gives them social status. When someone sees them, it's like, oh, there's Bill the millionaire. Oh, he owns this company, and there's this and that. And that. Meanwhile, Bill's right about to have a fucking heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
He's like got very little time left and doesn't even realize it. And he's taking Adderall all day to try to keep up, and doing cocaine and cheating on his wife and fucking flying on jets everywhere. And it looks on paper like he's the man,
Mm-hmm.
but meanwhile he's a disaster. And there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I was fortunate enough to start figuring out that stuff at a relatively young age, where I made the shift. And I think it's a very human thing to want external validation.
Yes,
For
it's sure.
Like we're social creatures. We're these tribal creatures. Like we want the other people in the tribe to, go, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the internal validation, at least for me, where like basically, I don't mean this like in a malignant way, but like when you kind of stop caring what other people think about you, and focus more on what you think about yourself. Like for me, that was like a huge shift, like a huge like giving up like doing things that like I thought that other people would think was cool, you know?
Right. That's what a lot of people do, right?
Yeah.
That's what a lot of us do. And I'm certainly have been guilty of that in my life.
Oh, we all have. Like
Yeah.
I have too. Like
Mhm.
it's human. It's not that big a dig, and maybe there's a balance. But then it's like, as soon as I figured out like that internal validation meant everything to me, and the external was just, it was fluff, you know?
Yeah.
It was this vapid thing that at the end of the day wasn't satisfying at all.
There's some satisfaction in the respect of people that you respect.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when you see this person's an exceptional person and they enjoy being with you, you're like, oh, maybe I'm okay.
And like there's actually a couple things I'd like to go back to, like what you were talking about. And one was like in reference to parents, like maybe I'll view them as babies now.
Mm-hmm.
But like as soon as it's probably my late 20s where I started like viewing them as human beings and like imperfect creatures like we all are.
Yeah.
And like all of a sudden I had all this empathy for them, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a quote, and I think it's attributed to Plato, but I don't think it's him. I think it's more of like a 19th century thing, but it goes something like, be kind, for everyone is fighting their own battle. And so like I apply that to like people. I apply it to myself, you know?
Yeah.
It's like I'm definitely fighting my battles still.
Yeah.
You know, I'm figuring some shit out, but it's not over. And I'm sure it never will be.
It never will be.
Yeah.
I don't imagine it ever is.
But you know, the process is interesting, and obviously breakthroughs are interesting. But what was the other point? Yeah, just the empathy for others, working on yourself. Like there's an Evel Knievel quote, and I'm gonna have to paraphrase because I can't remember it exactly. But he's like, you know, when I was young, I cared about what other people thought, but now that I'm old, I just care about what I think. Like, and it's like, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, and yeah, obviously I care what other people, at least the people I care about, I want them to think that I'm a decent person, right?
Sure.
You know, that's normal.
Yeah.
And again, going back to another thing you were talking about is like the most important thing in my life these days, are personal relationships.
Yeah.
It's like I'm at the point now where I'm, you know, and I'm sure you do the same thing. You curate your tribe, right?
Yes.
And like these relationships are like so rewarding. And so honestly, that's where I extract the most joy in my life from, is these personal relationships.
Yeah, that's what I'm most protective of too. Mm-hmm. Most protective of those people, but also protective of not allowing anyone else in the tribe that I don't think
you have to curate the tribe.
Yeah, you have to be very careful about that, because I know so many people that have been involved in friendships and relationships with people that are just disastrous, and it's like a drowning person. You try to help them and you drown too. Mm-hmm. You know, some people just will fucking drag you in, and other people's they'll elevate you. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's obviously not they're not perfect experiences. We're all human, but through even mistakes and then the reconciling of those mistakes and the communication through that, it's an educational experience for everybody involved, and everyone's sort of on the same sort of path, mm-hmm. in the sense where you're trying to be a better version of who you are. You're trying to be a better person, mm-hmm. and you know, that might be being a better parent or being a better friend or being a better artist or whatever it is you're trying to do. But it really benefits you to be around other people that are also trying to do that thing too, because mm-hmm. you know. One of the beautiful things about, for me, about having this podcast is being able to communicate with so many interesting people, and being able to have these conversations like we're having right now, where I get to, I just met you today, you know, but get a sense of your journey and your life. Mm-hmm. And I think about it through your eyes and through your perspective, and it educates me, and I think it educates a lot of the people that are listening, and it'll resonate with them. Like, oh, I kind of see where this guy's coming from, and it just expands our landscape of understanding. Yeah, I mean, and that's ultimately, we're trying, like the word harmonious, I've used it too many times probably, but that's really what it is. Like it's not going to be great all the time, but you want it to be as harmonious as possible. And you want to enjoy as much of it as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and sometimes like with you and what you did, it's like embracing things that are really fucking difficult. And through that, you get an understanding of yourself that's really not available to someone who doesn't go through struggle.
That's the intent for sure. Like, with no, again, it's that punctuated equilibrium. If there's not a traumatic, a stressor, say, you're not going to grow.
Yeah.
You're just going to flatline. And like, maybe there's no negativity there, but there's also no positivity.
Right.
You know?
You're just dull.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem with a lot of people today and why they're medicated, is that they're not experiencing life in a way that seems to resonate with them in a positive manner. It just doesn't seem right. It seems shitty and depressing. You know, I had this conversation with a buddy of mine the other day where he was talking about stages of his life where he was very depressed. And we came to this conclusion, but during that time, your life sucked, and now your life is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And of course you're happier. And that seems so simplistic to some people.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of there's without a doubt, there's clinical depression. There's people that have something wrong. There's an imbalance, whether it's a physical imbalance or a life imbalance or a trauma that they can't get over. But my friends that I know that have had those dark moments in their life, when their life turned around and now they're in a great relationship, now they have good friends, now they live in a good community, those people are fucking happier.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing a thing that they want to do with their life. Those people are happier.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a thing that we have this sort of binary view of what happiness is. And for some people, it's like, oh, I need to get on an SSRI. I need to get on this or that, or I need to do something. I need to, to some sort of chemical intervention to straighten out my head. And that's not always the case. Like sometimes it's just, you got to get through that and come out on the other side and figure out what is the process of becoming a more fulfilled person. What's the process of living a harmonious life? Like, how do I do that? Like, what is the thing? And I think we get a lot of the answers to that from talking to people and from listening to people talk about it, and then from trying things and learning and growing. And that's something it's not like a public narrative. It's not something that's being discussed. It's not something that's drilled into kids' heads. Like you're gonna go through some shit, but you got to trust in this process, and you have to have guidelines in your mind of what you want to do. You have to have ethics and morals. You have to have compassion for other people. Because if you think it's all about you, you're never going to be happy. Mm-mm. You're never, ever going to be happy. Mm-mm. The narcissists and the people that are like deeply connected to their own wants and needs, they always get out of that feeling hollow and empty. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that are, doing blow all the time and just trying to find some sort of external method of elevating their
a diversion.
Even, something.
Okay, if I do this, I'm not going to think about the important stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, like I've always been intrigued by the Greek or ancient Greek notion of like human flourishing. Like the Greeks called it eudaimonia, and it's this being, endeavoring to be the best that you can be, whatever that is. And it's not talking about vocation or external stuff, but you as a person, like figuring out, everything we've been talking about, like figuring out what brings you joy, applying yourself. And it's hard,
Yeah.
It's like, if it were easy, and I've had this discussion with other friends where, about human flourishing and stuff, and like, and this is going to sound a little bit negative, but I think there's a lot of people who can't be bothered, who are fully capable of flourishing if they applied themselves.
Right.
And for whatever reason, just, it's easier to do this.
I think they also don't have the tools. Like they never, like you got to think about like your life at a young age. You sort of sought out those journeys when you can, and some people, they don't develop those tools. They fall into a system that's very unserving for them, whether it's a system of, you know, getting an education, then you have student debt, student loan debt, and then so you have to get a job, and then you get a job that pays well because you have to pay off that debt, and then you buy a house, so now you have a mortgage and you have a family, so now you have responsibilities and you have all these things. But most of your day is spent doing something you absolutely don't want to do, but is also not rewarding. There's a lot of things you don't want to do, but when you do them, you're like, God damn, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah.
Very few people who are doing a 9-to-5 or longer job that they don't want to do have that feeling. There's just a lot of, you know, it's like that Thoreau quote, most men live lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah.
And that is so fucking true. And unless you find something that is satisfying and something that elevates you, something that with these experiences you gain insight as to why you think and what you think and what is good about these experiences with other human beings. And if you don't, you just become this fever-minded capitalist where you just are constantly chasing numbers because it's rewarded by society, that external validation that you get from driving a Mercedes, that thing that you get from having a nice house where people drive by and go, look at that guy's house.
Yeah,
Like
it's someone you don't even know.
Yeah.
Like that's important to you, what that person thinks. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what a lot of people like, right? They like to wear jewelry and look flashy, so when they show up, everybody goes, wow, look at him, look at her, look at them. You know, wow, they got the thing. They got those sneakers that I can't buy. They got that watch that I can't wear. Look at those glasses. Those are expensive. You know, like we live in this bizarre society where that is rewarded or at least highlighted so often in so many people's lives. It's like that's what you're seeing. It's like how they sell things in billboards and on commercials. And, you know, we don't realize that this is not going to bring you the joy that you're looking for.
Or you get that short-term fix, but it evaporates instantly, and it's like
you're constantly chasing the dragon.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's like I was reading about this Russian oligarch that they confiscated his yachts. And he's got this one yacht that's fucking insane. They confiscated it. Now that he's got this second yacht that's just as preposterous, maybe even more so, that operates on massive batteries, so it can literally drive as silent as a Tesla. And it's, you know, fucking hundreds of feet long, and like that's that world that you get into, like of constantly keeping up with the Joneses and all the other people. It's like it never ends. It never ends. You get to the highest levels of it all, and it never ends.
It's a series of false summits. It's like, I've arrived. Oh, wait a minute. No, I haven't. Yeah.
That's a great way to put it. A series of false summits. It's all illusions. It's all mirage. Yeah. And then one day he's dead. And that's it. And then all the people around him, that guy was a fucking asshole. And that's a fucking disaster. To die a multi-billionaire who was a fucking asshole who everybody hated is so strange.
It's so much wasted potential.
Yeah, but there's so many people that are just chasing it. I saw this image of Rupert Murdoch with his wife, and he was on the beach, and he literally looks like an alien. He's just like these bones and tissue and fat, and he's with this woman, and they were supposed to get married, and it didn't work out. And one of the things he was saying, he's in his 90s. It was like, I don't know which wife he's on, right? But he was saying that I'm looking forward to spending the second half of my life with her. Like, hey, bro, what do you know that I don't know? Like, you got about a month left. You know, I mean, if everything goes great, you might have 8 years. If everything goes great, but no one thinks about that while you're in the middle of it. All you're thinking about is, you know, keeping that fucking game going, that thing that's gotten you all those accolades, that thing that's gotten you all that respect. And it's just numbers, just
the
cranking
dopamine
numbers.
hits. Like,
it's like checking your social media forever to the end of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like checking the likes on your fucking Instagram post to the end of time. It's like it's empty. And that's the path that so many people are on. You know, I just don't understand it. I'll never understand it, but I get it. You know, I get how you could get sucked into that path.
Yeah, I totally understand the mechanism. Yeah.
The mechanism, yeah. And it's just like, it hijacks the human reward systems of you being like the leader of the tribe. But the leader of the tribe used to be the wise old warrior who had made the mistakes and proven his character and his mettle in combat and in life and had wisdom to impart on the others and could lead the tribe in a way that it could help these people and protect them. That just doesn't exist anymore. It's been hijacked by this system of monetary gain. And it's fucking weird. And obviously it's very easy for me to say. As someone who gets external validation and someone who makes money, it's easier for me to say. Because I've sort of removed myself from the hunger of that in a way. So I can go, oh, okay, I see what this is. Even though I've never been very motivated by money, I've certainly pursued it. But it's also not been anything that meant the most to me.
Money's freedom.
Yeah,
that's the way I look at it.
Yes,
it's like it opens options.
Yes,
but like money for the sake of money, like forget it.
It can allow you to pursue things that make you happy.
Yeah,
but you have to know what it is, and it's not being taught. You know, like think about the things that are being taught. I mean, perhaps they teach it a little bit in philosophy. But most of the time, if you're trying to get an education, you try to get an education to get a job.
I mean, that's the way it's geared towards now. Yeah. It's not like the ancient Greeks where education was like, here's how you live a good and virtuous life.
Yeah,
you know?
But the people that I've talked to that are the most boring are the ones that are just pursuing money. The people that I've talked to that are most fascinating are the ones that are trying to figure it out, and they've accumulated a lot of lessons and a lot of information, and they can talk about things, and I can get something out of that conversation. Like I can go, oh, I see how this guy thinks. Oh, I see how he got there.
Life's so profoundly weird, but it's just so cool.
It's very cool.
You know? Yeah.
Or it sucks, depending on where you are and
yeah.
what you're stuck in. You know, and some of it is beyond your control. Some of it is determinism. Some of it is your environment. Some of it is a shitty roll of the dice and you're working in a cobalt mine in the Congo. There's a lot of that to it. And some people, they transcend that. They figure their way out of that. And it's the hardest journey.
Yeah, it's like the money thing. Like there's been a couple of occasions where like I've had people reach out to me, I don't know, 20 years ago, like a friend of mine from the music days was like, hey, there's this Nirvana record that came out. It's like a collection of B-sides and bits and pieces that I guess the label put out to make some money. And they're like, hey, you play on a couple of songs. You're probably owed some money. And I'm like, I started thinking about it, and I'm like, like hire an attorney, like what? Sue the label, sue the band, and like, no.
Right.
Like, it's for money that I'm sure is not life changing. And even if it was, the process just made me so tired that it was like. and then more recently, something similar happened with Soundgarden. Like someone close to the band said, "Hey, there's these Soundgarden box sets that are out, and you play on a couple of the songs. Like, you're probably owed some money." And the same thing is like, no, I'm not even gonna start down that path.
Yeah, because even
like,
if it did make you money, it would probably rob you of some happiness.
Oh, just let it go. It's like, you know, it's like, I mean, I guess it kind of sucks that like whoever, like the bean counters at the label are like, fuck that guy, you know. But okay,
yeah,
you know, that's fine. I'll be all right.
You got something from that. No matter what, you can't put it in, you know, a bank account, but it's what you got from that is invaluable. It's like you were there. You have that. It changed you as a person.
Yeah, it's like that experience. Yeah, it's a. I mean, at this point, it's not a huge component of who I am, but it was definitely necessary steps on this journey, and I'm so glad things turned out the way they did. You know, like I never look back and go, I wish, you know, I was this like rich rock guy. And on so many levels, I'm glad that I didn't.
A lot of those guys are miserable.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know a few.
I know a few too.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the saddest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Is when you meet a miserable success.
Mm-hmm.
Even rock stars, even someone who's an artist, right? And for so many of them, they're only happy when they're on top. And it's not even necessarily happy. It's like euphoria.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a thing about it, like, oh my God, I'm the fucking man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, look at me. I got the long hair and the fucking guitar and everybody loves me. And it's just, yeah, it's almost a trap. It's almost like a gilded cage that you're a part of. And you're like, look at me. Yeah.
It would be cool to have that financial security and then do something totally different.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. It's also a trap in, you know, the trap of fame. It's like it's hard to know people. It's hard to get to know people because everybody's approaching you in a very alien way.
I mean, that was when I was young and obviously not on that huge level, but that was kind of when I got fired from Soundgarden, that was kind of part of the crisis where I was like, it was easy to put on the identity of like being the bass player for Soundgarden.
Right.
You know? And like, I was like the de facto cool guy.
Sure.
And
if you
like,
have a conversation with someone at dinner, what do? I'm the bass player for Soundgarden.
Or, you know, like women would show interest,
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And I, you know, especially being like a painfully shy young man, that was awesome. You know, but then it was like, when I did have that taken away, and it did knock me for a loop for a bit, but it also helped me recognize like, oh, I should just focus on Jason, the dude, you know, not Jason, the bass player for Soundgarden.
Right.
And that was kind of the slap in the face that kind of brought me around.
But you had to go through that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the thing about going through something that sucks. Like when you get on the other end of it and you achieve equilibrium, you go, okay, it was actually probably good for me.
I wholeheartedly believe I came out the other end better on every level. And like I'm happier now at 55 than I've ever been in my entire life. And each year gets better, you know?
That's success.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Why did you want to do this?
Do what?
This podcast.
I'm going to be honest. To give my R2AK site some oxygen.
The
Race to Alaska.
Oh, okay.
But also, you know, I'm a fan. I think the first podcast I listened to you was the one you did with James from Metallica.
Oh, that was great.
The beekeeping?
Yeah.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, he's very cool. He's an interesting guy.
Yeah, I knew him a little bit back in the day, but yeah, the beekeeping stuff was fascinating.
Yeah, I got connected to him through my friend Jim Brewer. Jim Brewer, who's a long time, he's been my friend for like 30 years.
The comedian. Yeah.
He opens for Metallica.
Okay.
Which is hilarious because he's a giant Metallica fan, and he doesn't need to do that. And I think they just offered it to him because they're friends with him, and like he decided that'd be a fun thing to do. And since he's such a Metallica fan, he speaks to those people. It's not like just a regular comedian opening for a band they're not interested in and the crowd doesn't engage. He talks about Metallica and he has material. And Jim is one of the most prolific and interesting guys that I know in terms of like his stand-up. Like Jim can, like something can happen in the news today and Jim can go on stage and do like 10 minutes on it. And just rant and rave, and he's such a fucking cartoonish character. He's so funny. So watching him open for Metallica is a fucking hoot. It's so hilarious because he's in his element, and he's also a brilliant comedian and just such a character. And so he reached out to me. He's like, "Hey man, you should have James Hatfield on. He's fucking awesome. Fucking be a great podcast." And I was like, "Let's do it. Let's do it." You know. So having him on was pretty cool.
Yeah, so that was my gateway to your show, and it put the hooks in me. It's like, okay, this is good.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah. Appreciate it. I'm glad we did this too.
Yeah, me too.
So let's tell everybody about your site, so maybe we can get that goal.
Oh, I mean, we already talked about it.
Well, how do I get to it? Like, what's the website?
So the website's supernautiloid.com.
Supernautiloid.
Yeah, one word. So it's a play on Black Sabbath's Supernaut.
Right.
But the nautiloid is like the prehistoric marine creature. So
what is it?
It's like a squid with a shell.
Oh,
like that.
Okay. Supernautiloid, Race to Alaska, 2023.
Yep.
Nice. Okay, so supernautiloid.com, and the link to the GoFundMe is up there as well?
Yeah, down the page.
Are you going to document this at all on either social media or on YouTube or anything like that?
So Barrett has a buddy who's a documentary filmmaker who he's going to do some stuff on it. So like maybe if enough people kick in like $5 or $10, we actually pay Tad to do a documentary because he's a professional. He's not an amateur, so it's going to cost some money to have it done right. But Tad's interested in doing it. I think he just needs to be remunerated properly, in order to complete the project. But yeah, that's been talked about, and it may happen.
Well, maybe we can make it happen.
Okay.
So the other thing that I would say to you is I think you should write a book.
So I can tell a story about my brush with the literary world if you want.
Okay, sure.
So I was at this another juncture, basically before I went to grad school. And I was like, maybe I should write a book, maybe it's time or whatever. And actually I got an agent, and I wrote a book proposal. Actually wrote the proposal when I was in Buenos Aires. And I remember I was sitting in this cafe in Buenos Aires, so it's like wintertime down there. And it's pouring down rain, and there's like water leaking from the roof, and there's pots and pans around the cafe, like catching the rainwater. And on my laptop, and I remember finishing the proposal, and it's like, cool. So when I get back to the States, I'll meet with the agent, and and like there was so many parallels. I'm sure you've been in that world too, with the literary world, like the business side of it, and with that in the music world. So this agent's promising me the world, like the classic like music biz thing, like you boys are going to be bigger than Led Zepp, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm taking it with a grain of salt. I'm like, okay, I'm being pretty moderate about the whole thing. So I finished the proposal, and I thought it was decent, gave it to him, and then got another meeting with him and some other dude. And they're like saying, kind of making these radical suggestions as far as like changing the thrust of the narrative and things like that. And I'd be open to like tweaking it, but like, if it's my book, it's going to be my vision. Yeah. Like any creative project. And then they started suggesting like a co-writer, which is this code for a ghostwriter.
Right.
And it's like, I'm not Hemingway, but I think I can put some sentences together, according to other people who told me that, who know these things. And so basically I got accepted to grad school, and I got a Tillman scholarship that paid for grad school. And it's like, okay, I'm going to grad school, and put the book on the back burner. But it'll probably happen someday.
I would suggest that you just write it.
Yeah.
And then try to sell it.
I've had other people suggest that as well.
Yeah, I think that's the only way to do it. I tried to do it the other way a long time ago, and I had a disastrous... I wound up giving the money back. I just had a couple of conversations with them. I'm like, I don't want to do it like this.
Yeah.
Like, nope, done.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do is just write what I was thinking about stuff. Yeah. And they had this very specific idea that they had a package that they wanted it to fit into. I was like,
It's totally similar to my experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they do.
Yeah.
It's like the scorpion and the frog, right? It's in my nature. Yeah, it's just what they do.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, listen, brother, I really appreciate it, man. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me
thank
as well.
you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And good luck, and don't fall in the water. Have a good time doing that.
We'll be very safe. I was reading the safety regulations, and it's like, this isn't very hippy dippy. You know? It's
I'm sure.
Yeah,
Do you have any social media or anything like that? You can tell people about?
just that.
Just that. Okay.
And I created the site myself. It's my first foray into that world at all.
Looks professional.
It's like one page. It's like
That's all you need,
Yeah.
though. That's all you need.
I did design the Super Nautiloid logo, which I'm kind of proud of. Because
Cool.
it's like, I don't know if you're familiar with Black Sabbath Volume 4.
Sure.
Yeah, it's my favorite Sabbath record. One of my favorite records. So it's an homage to that,
Nice.
obviously. Yeah. So I kind of mixed in like Sabbath and maritime and yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, again, I really enjoyed this. And thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.